Welcome to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannonohara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Yay! We have made it to entity clearing, or house, land, building, and space clearing from A to Z in the Talk to the Entities Spotlight Focus specialty on the Consciousness Anywhere podcast. This is most likely the most practical use of the Talk to the Entities work, is knowing how to clear a haunted hotel room, a haunted house, land, a building. This is really where the rubber meets the road, and you can have such an incredible change, an instantaneous relief, knowing that you're dealing with entities and knowing how to clear them. So if you have not already, if you're just, however you're coming to this podcast, my name is Shannonohara. I am the founder and creator of Talk to the Entities, and I am featuring, spotlighting each of the Talk to the Entities specialties over the next 12 months. We started already in February, March. This will be our fourth spotlight. And if you're interested in anything and everything entity consciousness related, you're definitely going to go back and re-listen to those podcast spotlights if on Talk to the Entities if you miss them. So clearing houses, clearing from A to Z, clearing houses, land, spaces of entities is a specialty because, yes, it's a general use of the entity work. And a lot of times people think it's really like the only use of the entity clearing stuff. But we specialize in it because it's so practical and so ubiquitous. It's like, how many of you guys listening have been in a haunted house and you knew it was haunted, but you didn't want to admit it was haunted because you didn't know what to do with it, or you didn't want to be weird, or if you thought you sort of thought you were crazy and maybe making it up. But when I ask you if you're ever in a haunted house, you're like, yeah, I do remember being in a haunted house. Or maybe you currently live in a house that's haunted. And I think first things first is we need to take the stigma or the charge off of haunted, because haunted can mean so many things. First of all, houses are never haunted like in Poltergeist, for example. When you hear about haunted houses, it's like, yes, houses can be haunted, but it's never this demonic black pit of terror. Well, maybe. I've not been in a haunted house like that. I guess a drug den could be pretty demonic black hole haunted. And these tools for clearing entities would work there too. Sometimes, let me talk about haunting for a minute, because it's a general word that has a lot of negative connotations. And what I mean by haunting is just when there's spirits present. And those spirits might be there for all sorts of reasons. And this is the beginning of what we need to recognize with haunting, is that the spirits sometimes they're stuck there. It could have been someone who crossed over or died in the house who isn't even aware that their body is dead. You can have somebody hanging around in a house just purely because they don't realize their body's dead. Then you can have other spirits haunting or occupying or being in a house or in a building or even on land because they're literally still there waiting for somebody to come back. They never wanted to leave that house because they made some promise that they would wait for or be there for somebody if they ever came back, and they're still there waiting. So you can have a lot of entities or spirits hanging out in a house for not creepy or malevolent reasons. Sometimes just because they have a commitment to staying in that house, or because they're unconscious and they're kind of not really aware that it's time for them to move on and they don't have a body anymore. And then you can also have entities who definitely have the point of view that they own that house or they own that land. It's an ownership entity. This is mine. You get this a lot and so I think this Talk to Entity specialty is really practical and useful for real estate agents, because there will be a lot of houses on the market that don't sell because they're haunted, and people can feel it. I've actually seen photographs of real estate agents who put up their for sale signs with the tagline on the top of the pillar, like, this house is not haunted. So it's like, it's time to just sort of like make this conversation an acceptable one, because it is something that occurs in the world. And the sooner that we can bring this out of the superstition and the weird and the creepy and the awful and the overly significant, the easier it's going to make like all of our lives, and also be a greater contribution to the entities that we are going to clear from houses. So I gave a couple of examples of hauntings. I alluded to like a drug den could potentially be like a demon pit, and the thing that creates that is the kind of entities that like to be around drugs tend to be really unconscious and anti-conscious and want to facilitate and maintain a lot of unconscious and anti-consciousness. There is a wide variety of spirits. The diversity of entities, spirits, is as diverse as the microbiotic universe. So there are so many microorganisms known and unknown on Earth, and there are as many known and unknown spirits in the spirit kingdom. And all that to say that when you're dealing with entities and clearing houses, you're not always going to be dealing with the same kind of entity. However, the good news is that the Talk to the Entities clearing tools, or the Access Consciousness Entity clearing tools, because they first are and originally Access Consciousness clearing tools. It's the entity clearings that my dad taught me. My dad is Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness. So it's his way of clearing entities that we still use today and Talk to the Entities. It's extremely effective. And the cool thing is that it works on multiple diversity of entities. You don't have to really know what kind of spirit you're dealing with. However, if you do have like an entity that's stuck in a house because they are unconscious, like they don't realize they don't have a body, all you literally have to say to them is you have to say, "Hi, are you aware you don't have a body anymore?" And a lot of times the entity will wake up to that. It only takes, basically, you're the facilitator of awareness. So a lot of times in my experience, that has been enough to wake an entity up to the fact that they have a different choice. And when they become aware that they don't have a body anymore, most of the time they leave, because entities don't, or, beings without bodies don't really need to live in houses. And sometimes you have to tell like entities, like, it's like it's like talking sense to them. This is not the entity clearings, but this is just like talking sense to entities. If you have an entity that is like, so if you have a haunted house and you don't know what the kind of entity is or why it's haunted, asking questions can really help. And even asking questions of the entities, I don't know if that freaks you out or if that empowers you or it seems like common sense to you, but we do need to get to a place where talking to entities is common practice. And talking to the entities will give you a lot of information. And guess what? You can talk to the entities. Has anyone ever taught you? Probably not. Have people discouraged you? Probably. Does that mean that you can't? Absolutely not. So if you were asking them like, "Hey, like, why are you hanging out in this house?" A lot of times they'll tell you like, "I'm waiting for so-and-so to come home," or "This is my house." And if they have either one of those scenarios, then you sort of talk sense to them. You're like, "Okay, well, this is the year. We're in 2025. Like you tell the spirit, like, "We're in 2025. Do you still think that person's going to come back? The person you're waiting for, do they even have a body anymore? Like, how long have you been waiting here for that, person to come back? And what if you could go find that person now in spirit form?" And that sets them free in that way. If you have an entity that has like this ownership point of view about the house, I basically talk sense to them. I say, "Look, you don't have a body anymore. You do not own this house. You can leave now. Like, is this enough for you? Is staying and haunting and owning this house like enough for you?" And I ask that question, like, is this enough for you? A lot when I come across entities that are like haunting or hanging out in a place, because my point of view is, why, if I was a spirit, I would definitely not want to just be hanging around in one house year after year after year after year. I would want to go have infinite adventures of consciousness and possibility and transformation. So when you ask the spirits, like, is this enough for you? A lot of times that helps them wake up too. I remember quite some years ago, I walked into a public women's restroom. I can't remember where I was, but it was in a big city. And I walked into the restroom and there was this spirit like standing like close to behind kind of like the door. And it like startled me. And I sort of like went and did my business. And I was like, why is this spirit like hanging out in this ugly women's bathroom? Like, and I said to it, I was like, what are you doing? Like, is this enough for you? And immediately the spirit left. So you can be a real gift when it comes, like, if you're aware of entities and if you're willing to talk to them and set them free, like, because haunting isn't necessarily this like bad thing. It oftentimes can just be awareness of like you've come across a stuck spirit or an unconscious spirit. So that's like house clearing common sense. When it comes to land, that's an interesting one because you can have a lot of native spirits or native entities. I experienced this like a lot. And when I lived in Australia cumulatively for about 10 years. And there's a lot of Aboriginal spirits that have a lot of presence and sense of protection and connection to the land. And a lot of times spirits can inhibit when land's getting developed, because they don't want you to cut down the trees. They don't want you to deforest. They don't want rivers to change directions, et cetera, which I'm like all for that. And you can also have like native spirits on land who inhibit or prevent the sale of land. I've seen this a lot. You can also have ancestral spirits. I see this a lot with people in India, and I worked with a lot of Indian clients who have, the Indians do this thing where they like the whole family owns like land or a house. And if the ancestors don't want that land to be sold, they will inhibit or prevent that. So it becomes key to be able to talk to those ancestors and be like, hey guys, I think we could do something different. Just even opening up a dialogue rather than acting like we're at the effect and the spirits are in charge and we have no input, because that a lot of times isn't the case. A lot of issues get created due to simply people not engaging and cooperating and talking to entities. Imagine like you were living in a society and everyone pretended you didn't exist and never ever talked to you or looked at you. It's like, how would that make you feel? So getting like into the conversation is like half the battle. And yeah, so I also want to just make a distinction that like a haunted house can feel quite different than like we're like having an entity just visit temporarily. I have a house and land clearing audio that you can play in your house or on your land or like in your apartment, and it clears entities. It works so well. It is the gold standard for clearing. We will link it below for you for sure. I have used it myself. It's me doing the clearings, but it's like a 25-minute and it loops. So I think it plays for like an hour or maybe a little bit more, but since I made that, I thought I would use it. I've used it twice myself, and only in my entire life have I had to use it twice, and it was in the same place both times, which is Zermatt, Switzerland. Zermatt, for those of you guys that don't know, is the car-free village that's at the base of the Matterhorn in Switzerland. So it's just north of the Italian, like the Swiss-Italian border, those Alps. It's an epic place. And I've stayed in 2 Airbnbs there, and both times I had to use my own house and land clearing audio. And one of the houses we were staying in was an old chalet, and it was nice. Like the Swiss know how to keep their old stuff looking really good. But there was a very clear spirit that was like in one of the bedrooms upstairs. And like, it was the kind of spirit where like you'd walk you come upstairs and there'd be like something on the landing, like a pen or a bag of potato chips or like a toy, always something different. And I knew like, it was like, it kept on putting that there to like get my attention. And I tried clearing it, and it was a young boy actually. And I think that he'd like died in an avalanche, but he like lived in that house. So he like went home as a spirit and sort of just stayed there ever since, because the family was like long gone and probably long dead. But he was like quite stuck. And that can happen when a person dies in a traumatic, all of a sudden experience, like an avalanche or a car crash, an explosion, plane crash, drug overdose, etc. You can have beings who are like frozen in the shock, the post-traumatic stress. They take PTSD with them as spirits. So this young boy was like frozen, and he like had probably, my sense is he had died in like the 1920s, but he was like pretty stuck. And I tried to clear him and it like wouldn't work, which is weird because like when I clear entities, it's usually very effective. But this spirit was like really stuck, and you can get entities that are just like really dug in because they're like super unconscious and just super PTSD and really in shock and stuff. So I just put the space clearing loop on repeat in the room that this entity occupied the most, like where he felt the most present. I had to play it for like a day and a half, 24 hours plus another half a day. Then he left. So sometimes, especially in older properties, you can have entities that are like really dug in. My sister purchased a house in upstate New York that was built in the 1700s. And I remember when she got that house, she was like, there's this one room in the house that is so haunted and nobody wants to go in there. And I said, you got to play my loop. So she put the space and house clearing loop in there. And I think it actually took a full week of playing it nonstop on a loop before that spirit would leave, because that spirit had literally been there for centuries. And now an advertisement sponsored by Consciousness. Have you heard of the Access.me app? The Access.me app is 25 plus years of Access consciousness classes. Now, if that excites you or overwhelms you, let me tell you that some of the most life-changing, epically, no words to describe the profound transformation of my life and the accessing of infinite possibility I have gained through the classes that you'll find in the Access Me app. If you were to purchase each one of these classes individually, you would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you were to attend each of these Access Consciousness classes, you would need to have been going to classes for 25 plus years, like me. But now, Access.me costs only $275 a month. So you're essentially renting these incredibly profound, priceless, literally invaluable classes that will access consciousness, transform your universe, and essentially educate you in areas that too often we really don't receive a good education. Like, how do we have easy, honoring, intimate, profound relationships with ourselves, with others? What would it take for magic to actually be what we turned to for having more money, for having more health? What would it take to not feel like all of your wishes and dreams for consciousness and lightness and being happy to not just be a stupid pipe dream that are never going to happen because what's honored here is density and intensity? Sure. And what do you know? Access.me is a treasure trove of possibility that you can subscribe to on a monthly basis to access more consciousness. How does it get any easier than that? Check it out, access.me online, and see you in the fields of consciousness. Okay, so let's talk about what's on the clearing loop. So I will go through a quick rundown of how to clear entities, because why not? Share the wealth of information. Anybody can do this. This is not like you need the credentials. Like when I first learned how to clear entities, I was clueless. I had like no idea what I was doing or if it was even working, but like I did it because I had nothing to lose. So I just tried it. And over time practicing it, I got way more sensitive and way better at it. So if at first you have no clue, like welcome to the club. And if you do have a clue and you already do entity work or you've been practiced at this, like great. And like, let's use the tools. Just a quick aside. And before I get into the clearing tools, I was in London on the weekend and there was like an access event and there was like a bunch of people getting together to like swap body processes and run bars. And as soon as I walked in the room, and I get this a lot, this one woman started coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing. And I get this like a lot, like people walk by me and they'll start coughing and coughing and coughing. And what that is their entities are like waking up and because they know I'm there. So I started clearing entities on this woman and it took about 4 minutes, but then she stopped coughing. But she was coughing the entire time. And I just patiently went through the clearings and like cleared the entities and like stayed present. And then finally the entities left. And there was another gentleman who was there who has done talk to the entities. He's from Bangalore, India. And he was living in Scotland. So he came down for the weekend to the Access event in London. And he was chatting to me and my husband, Max. And he was talking about, he was talking about that he has my space. He has my entity clearing loop, the one I've told you guys about. And he says he plays it all the time. And I was like, that's awesome. Have you done the Talk to Entities beginning class? And he said, yes, he had. And I was like, cool. And he goes, it just is like, it's like so much. He's like, there's just so much entity activity. And I was like, yes. And this brings me to the thing of that once you start clearing entities, it's not like, it's sort of like cleaning a kitchen. It will look good and it'll be clear for a while, but then eventually you have to clean it again. And there's a presence that's required and an engagement with the energy of the world that I think a lot of people underestimate when they're choosing to become more conscious. And especially when you're clearing entities, it's not something you do once. It's something you have to continue to engage with or that you can continue to engage with, just like exercise. It's like the more you use it, the better you get. And like, for example, that woman who was at the event who had cleared the entities, I didn't talk to her. I didn't tell her about it. I was laying down having my bars run and she was coughing and coughing. I thought, okay, well, I'll just deal with this. And I know that uncontrolled coughing can oftentimes be entities. In my own experience, even, I can do a lot of coughing around when there's entities that need to be cleared. Just an aside, in case anyone else has that. So these are the general entity clearings. I'm going to go through them and use them if you want. Please check out all the links and the resources we have below. My clearing audio, we have that's the thing. Yes, we have this whole specialty, house and space clearings from A to Z. That's part of this specialty focus. So you can learn like really in depth everything that's required, literally from A to Z, to clear a house, building, or land. And this shit like works. It's like super effective. And if you're a real estate agent, like you really need this. So, entity clearing, you ask, who are you? Who were you before that? 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 And who will you be in the future? That's entity clearing number 1. Who are you? Number 2, what are you? What were you before that? 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 And what will you be in the future? And if you can feel any energy moving or anything happening while I'm going through these clearings, that's because the clearings are working. The entities are leaving. And I'm not even specifically targeting any entities. That's how effective these entity clearing questions are. They're really idiot proof. Like you don't even have to know what you're doing and they'll work. Who are you? First question. What are you? If who are you doesn't completely work, then you ask, what are you? And then if what are you doesn't work, what's your job? What was your job before that? 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 And before that, and before that, and before that, before that, and what will your job be in the future? You can all go now. So the way it works is an entity because it's stuck in an identity. For example, are you your name, your nationality, your gender, and your body? When your body dies, are you going to be your name, your nationality, your gender, and your body? Or are you an infinite being without that definition? This lifetime, you have the identifier of your name, your gender, your identity, essentially, your identity body. But when your body dies, you're no longer going to be that identity. You are going to be an infinite being, the infinite being you are right now, too. But what happens when people cross over and they aren't choosing, they get stuck in their identity and they remain in that identity. So when you ask, who are you? I'm so-and-so. Who were you before that? Gets them to look that they had another lifetime with a different identity. Oh, I was so-and-so. And who were you before that? Oh, I was so-and-so. And who will you be in the future allows them to recognize that they have another choice. So essentially the entity clearing tools you're not actually clearing the entities. You're literally just facilitating choice, and it's their choice to leave. And how does it get any better than that? So that's the general, most basic entity clearing. So those 3 questions. Then on top of that, there's a lot of other cool stuff that we can do to get way more into the nitty gritty and clear out the corners and really deal with what makes a house feel heavy or a space feel heavy. And that is in the house clearing from A to Z specialty class. There is also, all this information is available in a lot of the Talk to Entities classes, but the A to Z classes obviously specializes in this specifically. And then if you don't want to do it yourself, you can also just get my entity clearing audio. It's $50 and it works like a charm. You put it on your phone. Anytime you need to stay in a hotel room that feels weird, you play it. It'll get that place cleared right up. Yeah. Having more peace with awareness and ease with entities. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. How does it get better than this? If you want to learn more, tune in later in the month for the Talk to the Entities roundtable, where I will be joined by 2 other Talk to the Entities facilitators. And we're going to dive deep and tell stories and share some of the really cool things that we've all accomplished with these clearing tools in houses, with spirits, on the land, and in the world. Bye, guys. Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who you know who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on Shannon-Ohara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.